This is an Andean condor, a member of the order Accipitriformes and part of the New World vulture family. Their main habitat is the Andes Mountains in South America. Male Andean condors have a dark red fleshy crest on their heads, like the one you see in the video, which is definitely a male. The one perched in the tree doesn't have the crest, so I think that's a female. They live in the biggest aviary in the entire Berlin Zoo. Its total volume might actually be larger than all the other raptor enclosures combined. I think this kind of massive aviary, with plenty of space and height, is probably one of the best ways for a city zoo to house and display birds of prey. But in this zoo, the Andean condor is pretty much the only raptor living in luxury. Most of the others are housed in the Eagle Canyon aviaries. By my count, there are theoretically 16 or 17 species of birds of prey in the Berlin Zoo. And just casually snapping photos, I somehow managed to capture 12 of them. Honestly, I even surprised myself. I felt unstoppable that day. Traditionally, birds from the orders Accipitriformes, Falconiformes, and Strigiformes are all considered birds of prey. They usually have sharp beaks, powerful talons, and they hunt other animals for food. True aerial predators. Interestingly though, the Andean condor's family, the New World vultures, was almost kicked out of the raptor club. Their beaks and talons aren't particularly sharp, their legs aren't very muscular, and they mostly get by eating carcasses instead of hunting live prey. What's even more surprising is that genetically, New World vultures aren't actually that closely related to the other birds of prey in the Accipitriformes order. The king vulture is also part of the New World vulture family. It has a pretty abstract look, mostly white, with touches of red and black mixed in. Like its relatives, it mostly feeds on animal carcasses. Among New World vultures, the king vulture actually has the sharpest beak, which makes it especially good at tearing into tough, rotting flesh. That's why, when smaller vultures come across a carcass they can't break open, they'll often wait for the butcher king vulture to show up, make the first cut, and take the first bite. Only after it's had its fill do the others get their turn. Maybe that's how it earned the title, king. Of course, the Andean condor we talked about earlier is also something of a master at animal disassembly. The crested caracara shares its enclosure with the king vulture. Their native ranges overlap quite a bit in the wild, so you could say they're longtime neighbors who know how to get along. It's also the only falcon species in the entire Berlin Zoo. The word caracara comes from an indigenous South American language and means noisemaker or screamer. Unlike most falcons, the crested caracara actually prefers walking around on the ground, kind of like a chicken. And here we have the bearded vulture, also known as the lammergeier. As a native European raptor, it's actually featured in quite a few zoos across the continent. But the one here is especially active, so I ended up taking a lot more photos than usual. Birds aren't exactly known for having chins, but this guy's throat is covered in shaggy yellow feathers that look a lot like a beard, which is where the name bearded vulture comes from. In the wild, their diet is pretty unique. They rarely go for meat. Instead, they actually prefer bones. Yeah, bones. But in the zoo, things seem to be a little different. I saw this one chomping on a chunk of meat, so maybe it's not that they don't like meat. It's just that, out in the wild, they usually can't afford to be picky. The white-headed vulture's beak reminds me of a cooked crab claw, or maybe a lobster claw. It's listed as critically endangered by the IUCN, with only around 5,000 to 6,000 mature individuals left. That might not sound too bad at first, but since they're spread out over a wide range, that number doesn't go very far. Its Latin genus name, Trigonoceps, literally means triangle head, which is surprisingly accurate. It really does have a triangular head. At the zoo, it shares an enclosure with a white-necked raven. I haven't looked into how smart the white-headed vulture is, but I really hope it's got some brains, because living with a raven, one of the most intelligent birds out there, may come with some serious peer pressure. The secretary bird is one of my absolute favorite big birds. It's got a tall, lean build with long legs that are slender but surprisingly powerful. The way it walks, graceful yet commanding, gives off this vibe that's both fierce and refined. Honestly, it just totally fits my aesthetic. As for the name secretary bird, it comes from those long feathers sticking out behind its head. They look like quill pens tucked behind the ear, just like an old-fashioned secretary ready to take notes. Sharing a home with the secretary bird is Ruppel's vulture. In the wild, their ranges overlap somewhat. They both live across parts of sub-Saharan Africa and play vital roles in the ecosystem. This species might actually hold the title of the world's highest flying bird. In 1973, one of them literally collided with an airplane at an altitude of 11,300 meters. It remains one of the rare bird-plane collision records in aviation history. Of course, that's not their usual cruising altitude. They typically fly at around 6,000 meters. Still, not bad for a bird with no boarding pass. The last vulture on the list here is the Eurasian griffon vulture. It belongs to the same genus as Ruppel's vulture, and it's also considered a native species in parts of Europe. Among the vultures in its genus, the Eurasian griffon is actually one of the more refined-looking ones. You could even say it's got a bit of charm. Fun fact, they're surprisingly hygienic for scavengers. They like to keep clean and often groom themselves by clear water sources. Here at the zoo, they share their enclosure with the marabou stork, another big African scavenger, though a very different kind of roommate. In the Eagle Canyon, I came across at least 2 large walk-in aviaries. One of them seemed to house both a boteleur and a palm nut vulture. As soon as I stepped in, the boteleur was already striking this dramatic pose. Here, have a listen to its call. Despite that bold entrance, boteleurs aren't actually noisy birds. They call pretty rarely. The second aviary was shared by snowy owl and Eurasian eagle owl. I only spotted one Eurasian eagle owl, but there were quite a few snowy owls hanging around. These walk-in aviaries are honestly a really thoughtful design choice. They give the raptors plenty of space to move around while also letting visitors observe them up close. Compared to the typical closed-off bird cages, the experience is just on another level. The last bird of prey in the Valley of the Eagles is, or was, the spectacled owl. I'm not sure if it's still around though. On my most recent visit, I didn't see this bird. That's all the birds of prey I spotted at the Berlin Zoo. The variety here is genuinely impressive. When it comes to enclosure design, the highlights were definitely the 2 walk-in aviaries and the huge habitat of the Andean condor. The rest of the Eagle Canyon follows a more traditional layout, which is understandable. After all, giving every raptor a 5-star mansion isn't exactly realistic, even if they all do look like they think they deserve one.